Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Battles of the American Civil War with Bang and Dang, and possibly the last big battles of 1863, which are the so-called battles of Chattanooga, Lookout Mountain, and Missionary Ridge, both right after each other, same armies, same people, same everything. And actually, the Confederates are mixing the Potomac and the Army of the Tennessee together right now. Lookout Mountain, also known as the Battle Above the Clouds,
Ooh, I like that.
Fought November 24th, 1863, as part of the Chattanooga Campaign. After their disastrous defeat at the Battle of Chickamauga, the 40,000 men of the Union Army of the Cumberland, under Major General William Rosecrans, retreated to Chattanooga.
Oh.
Bragg's Army of Tennessee besieged the city, threatening to starve the Union forces into surrender. Hamas. Bragg's troops established themselves on Missionary Ridge and Lookout Mountain, both of which had excellent views of the city. The Tennessee River flowing through the city and the Union supply lines.
Okay, that's cool.
So they know they can see everything that's happening
Yeah,
right
Lookout
now.
Mountain
That's
for
why
a
it's
reason.
called that, right?
Well, Lookout Mountain was actually a ridge, or narrow plateau, that extended 85 miles southwest from the Tennessee River, culminating in a sharp point 1,800 feet above the river. From the river to the end of the mountain rose at about a 45-degree angle, and about two-thirds of the way to the summit, it changed grade, forming a ledge or a bench about 150 to 300 feet wide, extending for several miles around both sides of the mountain. That'd be pretty sweet. Above the bench, the grade steepened into a 500-foot face of rock called the Palisades. Palisades? Confederate artillery atop Lookout Mountain controlled access by the river, and the Confederate cavalry launched raids on all supply wagons heading toward Chattanooga, which made it necessary for the Union to find another way to feed their men. They're like, oh shit, we can't go that way.
Well, we've already gotten into this with the cracker line, but the Union government, alarmed by the potential defeat, sent reinforcements. October 17th, Major General Ulysses S. Grant received command of the Western armies, designated the Military Division of Mississippi. He moved to reinforce Chattanooga and replaced Rosecrans with Major General George Thomas. Yeah, poor Rosecrans. Thomas launched a surprise amphibious landing at Brown's Ferry October 27th that opened the Tennessee River by linking up Thomas's Army of the Cumberland with a relief column of 20,000 troops from the Eastern Theater's Army of the Potomac.
Uh-oh.
Look at these guys coming together, led by Major General Joseph Hooker.
Right. Supplies and reinforcements were thus able to flow into Chattanooga over the Cracker Line, greatly increasing the chances of Grant's forces. In response, old General Bragg from the old Rebs, he ordered Lieutenant James Longstreet, Lieutenant General, to force the Federals out of Lookout Valley, directly to the west of Lookout Mountain. Makes sense.
Well, I don't know how it could be a Lookout Valley. What are you looking out at?
All right, Lookout Valley. The ensuing Battle of Waxahachie, which was October 28th, 29th, was one of the war's few battles fought exclusively at night.
It was.
The old Rebs were repulsed, and the Cracker Line was secured. 12th of November, 1863. Old General Bragg himself placed Major General Carter Stevenson in overall command for the defense of the mountain, with Stevenson's own division positioned on the old summit.
The brigades of Brigadier Generals John K. Jackson, Edward C. Walthall, and John C. Moore were placed on the bench of the mountain. Jackson later wrote about the dissatisfaction of the commanders assigned to this area. He says, indeed, it was agreed on all hands that the position was one extremely difficult to defend against a strong force of the army advancing under cover of a heavy fire.
Right, I mean, jeez.
Thomas L. Connolly, historian of the Army of Tennessee, wrote that despite the imposing appearance of Lookout Mountain, the mountain's strength was a myth.
Right.
It was impossible to hold the bench, which was commanded by Federal artillery at Moccasin Bend. Oh, right. Right, that's where we've heard Lookout Mountain. Yeah, they've been there before. Although Stevenson placed an artillery battery on the crest of the mountain, the guns could not be depressed enough to reach the bench.
Right.
Which was accessible from numerous trails on the west side of the mountain, too. So, yeah, not really strategic for you.
Jeez, these guys are idiots. Major General William Sherman from the Old North arrived from Vicksburg with his 20,000 men of the Army of Tennessee in about mid-November. Grant, Sherman, Thomas, they all planned a double envelopment of Bragg's force, with the main attack by Scheumann against the northern end of the Missionary Ridge, supported by Thomas in the center. And then you had Hooker, who would capture Lookout Mountain and then move across the Chattanooga Valley to Rossville, Georgia. And then he would cut off the old rebels' retreat to the south. General Grant subsequently, he withdrew support for a major attack by Hooker on Lookout Mountain, intending the mass of his attack to be by Sherman.
All right, November 23rd, Sherman's force was ready to cross the Tennessee River. Grant ordered Thomas to advance halfway to Missionary Ridge on a reconnaissance in force to determine the strength of the Confederate line, hoping to ensure that Bragg would not withdraw his forces and move in the direction of Knoxville, where Major General Burnside was being threatened by a Confederate force under Longstreet at the time. Thomas sent over 14,000 men toward a minor hill called Orchard Knob and overran the Confederate defenders there. Surprised by Thomas's move against Orchard Knob on November 23rd and realizing that his center might be more vulnerable than he had thought, Bragg quickly readjusted his strategy. He said, "We got to do things different.
Do things my way." He recalled all units within a day's march that had recently ordered to Knoxville. He began to reduce the strength on his left by withdrawing Major General William H.T. Walker's division from the base of Lookout Mountain. He placed them on the far right of Missionary Ridge. He assigned Hardee to command his now critical right flank, turning over the left flank to Carter Stevenson. Stevenson needed to fill the gap left by Walker's divisions from the mountain Chattanooga Creek. So he sent Jackson's brigade of Chetham's division and Cummings' brigade of his own division into that very position.
All right.
Well, Jackson himself continued as temporary division commander on the mountain. All right. Stevenson deployed Walthall's brigade of the 15 Hundo Mississippians as pickets near the base of the mountain, withholding enough for a reserve for Moore's brigade, which would defend the main line on the bench near the Craven's house.
Or Cravens.
Right.
The Union side had also changed plans. Sherman had 3 divisions ready to cross the Tennessee, but the pontoon bridge at Brown's Ferry had torn apart, and Brigadier General Peter J. Osterhaus's division was stranded in Lookout Valley. After receiving assurances from Sherman that he could proceed with 3 divisions, Grant decided to revive the previously rejected plan for an attack on Lookout Mountain and reassign Osterhaus to Hooker's command.
24th of November, Hooker had about 10,000 men in his 3 divisions to operate against Lookout Mountain. Acknowledging that this was too large of a force for a simple diversion, Grant authorized a more serious effort against the mountain, but he did not agree to a full-scale assault. Hooker was ordered to take the point only if his demonstration should develop its practicability. Hooker ignored this subtly and at 3 a.m. on the 24th of November ordered Geary to cross Lookout Creek and to assault Lookout Mountain, marching down the valley and sweeping every rebel from it.
Well, Hooker did not plan to attack Stevenson's division on the top of the mountain, assuming that capturing the bench would make Stevenson's position untenable.
Right.
His force would approach the bench from 2 directions. Whitaker's brigade would link up with Geary at Wauhatchie, while Grose's brigade and Osterhaus's division would cross Lookout Creek to the southeast. Both forces would meet near the Craven's house. Osterhaus's division was in support. Woods' brigade was assigned to cover Gross and cross the creek after him. Williamson's brigade was assigned to protect Hooker's artillery near the mouth of Lookout Creek. Hooker arranged an impressive array of artillery to scatter the Confederate pickets and cover his advance. He had 9 batteries set up near the mouth of Lookout Creek, 2 batteries from the Army of the Cumberland on Moccasin Point, and 2 additional batteries near Chattanooga Creek. He said, "Coming for you, boys."
Yeah, Geary's expected dawn crossing of Lookout Creek was delayed by high water until about 8:30 a.m. First across the footbridge was Cobham's brigade, followed by Ireland's, which formed to Cobham's left, and it became the center of Geary's battle line. Candy's brigade then extended the Union left down to the base of the mountain. Whitaker's brigade followed in the rear. From 9:30 to 10:30 a.m., Geary's skirmishers advanced through the fog and mist that obscured the mountain. Contact was made with Walthall's pickets about 1 mile southwest of Lookout Point. Oh, here we go. Confederates were significantly outnumbered and could not resist the pressure, falling back but leaving a number behind to surrender. Hooker ordered an artillery bombardment to saturate the Confederate line of retreat, but the effect was minimized because of poor visibility and the fact that 2 forces were almost on top of each other. Yeah, kind of hard to do that, huh?
Much of the ground over which we advanced was rough beyond conception. It was covered with an untouched forest growth, seamed with deep ravines, and obstructed with rocks of all sizes which had fallen from the frowning wall on our right.
Dude, these guys are in places where nobody goes to.
Right. Besides them.
Right.
The ground passed over by our left was not quite so rough, but taking the entire stretch of the mountainside traversed by our force, it was undoubtedly the roughest battlefield of the war, said by a sergeant major, unnamed, of the 96th Illinois.
So he means nothing. The Union pursuit of the skirmishers was halted at around 11:30 a.m., 300 yards southwest, the point when Ireland and Cobham encountered Walthall's reserve southwest of the Craven's house. The 2 Confederate regiments impulsed The two Confederate regiments repulsed Ireland's first attempt at assaulting their field works. A second assault succeeded, though, enveloping the outnumbered Confederates 4-1. Despite Walthall's attempt to rally his men, he could not prevent a disorderly retreat back toward the Craven's house. The Union brigades kept up their pursuit past the point and along the bench. Ooh, they're like, keep on going.
As Gary's men appeared below the point around noon, Candy's brigade advanced across the lower elevations of the mountain, clearing the enemy from the east bank of the Lookout Creek. Hooker ordered Woods's and Gros's brigades to begin crossing the footbridge over the creek. Woods moved east at the base of the mountain, and Gros moved up the slope. These movements isolated part of Walthall's brigade, and the entire 34th Mississippi was forced to surrender, along with 200 men from Moore's picket line.
Ooh, dang. Moore was reluctant to take action. 9:30 a.m., he had sent a message to Jackson, asking where he should deploy his brigade, and Jackson replied about 11 a.m. Jeez. He expressed his frustration that Moore had seemingly forgotten the plan to defend the line of Craven's house. Peter Cozzens criticized Jackson's poor performance in leading the defense. He says, there was a bungling aplenty among the Confederate commanders on Lookout Mountain that day, but no one displayed greater negligence than did Jackson.
Giving the Jackson name a bad one.
He remained glued to his headquarters near the base of the cliff. He was nearly a mile from the line he had been charged to defend. In his report of the battle, Jackson tried to excuse his dereliction of duty by arguing that his headquarters was as good a spot from which to receive both commands from Stevenson on the summit and reports from the front line. That may have been true, but his presence was badly needed near the Craven's house. Jackson lacked even the presence of mind to call for reinforcements. Stevenson had to offer them.
He's like, hey, Jackson, do you want some of my guys? Or
I'm sure, bud.
All right. When Stevenson heard the fighting between Walthall and Gary, he ordered Pettus to take 3 regiments from the summit to assist Jackson. By this time, Moore's Alabamans were moving up amidst Walthall's retreating men, and they fired on Ireland's New Yorkers from 100 yards.
Uh-oh.
Unable to see the size of the force resisting it through the fog, the Union men retreated beyond a stone wall. What is that? Just random stone walls.
Right.
Everywhere. One day somebody's going to use these. Moore's 1,000 men took positions in their rifle pits facing the wall and waited for the inevitable counterattack. Ireland's men were too exhausted to make an immediate move, though.
Right.
As Whitaker's brigade arrived after 1 p.m., they stepped over Ireland's men and rushed into the attack. They said, excuse me? Candy's brigade was moved up the mountainside on Whitaker's left, followed by the brigades of Woods and Gros. Moore could see that he was being significantly outflanked on the right and chose to fall back rather than be surrounded.
Why not, right?
That's where these people were.
That's
just dumb.
That's stupid.
And the battlefield's on a freaking 45-degree angle.
Stupid. All the Union brigades, including Ireland's tired men, began the pursuit. Hooker was concerned that his lines were becoming intermingled and confused by the fog and the rugged ground and their attempting defeat if the Confederate brought up reinforcements in the right place. He ordered Gary to halt for the day, but Gary was too far behind his troops to stop them. Hooker wrote, fired by success with a flying, panic-stricken enemy before them, they pressed impetuously forward.
All right. Well, Moore's brigade was able to escape in the fog, and Walthall had adequate time to form a rough defensive line 300 to 400 yards south of the Craven's house.
Really?
His 600 men took cover behind boulders and fallen trees and made enough of a racket to dissuade Whitaker's men from moving against them.
Oh.
By this time, Pettus's brigade of 3 Alabama regiments had descended from the summit and came to Walthall's assistance after 2 p.m.
Well time.
Damn, it's foggy like that after 2 p.m.
Mm-hmm. It's in the hills. Run for the hills.
Hooker sent Grant alternated missions of panic and bluster. At 1:25 p.m., he wrote that the conduct of all the troops has been brilliant and the success has far exceeded my expectations. Our loss has not been severe, and of prisoners, I should judge that we had not less than 2,000.
Oh.
At around 3 p.m., he wrote, can hold the line I am now on, can't advance. Some of my troops out of ammunition, can't replenish.
Oh.
Damn. So that was only an hour and a half later.
Responded to a plaintive message sent from Whitaker, General Thomas approved the transfer of Brigadier General William Carlin's brigade, which was the 19th Corps, to aid Hooker.
Or 14th.
Yeah, the 14th, sorry. Yeah, stupid. To aid Hooker. Carlin was delayed for hours attempting to cross the river and reported to Gary at about 7 p.m., playing no role in this combat. By sunset, a confident Hooker informed Grant that he intended to move into Chattanooga Valley as soon as the fog lifted. He signaled, in all probability, the enemy will be evacuate tonight. His line of retreat is seriously threatened by my troops. Oh, Grant's like, I like that.
About time.
Right. He's like, pour me another one. Oh, jeez. Bragg responded to the request by Stevenson for reinforcements by sending Colonel J.T. Holtclaw's brigade under the condition that it was be used only to cover a Confederate withdrawal from Lookout Mountain, ordering Stevenson at about 2:30 p.m. to withdraw to the east side of Chattanooga Creek. Stevenson was reluctant to break contact until his troops on the summit could escape on the Summertown Road into the Chattanooga Valley.
All right, the brigades of Walthall, Pettus, and Moore were ordered to hold on for the rest of the afternoon.
Can you guys do that?
Maybe. For hours through the afternoon and into the night, the 6 Alabama regiments under Pettus and Moore fought sporadically with the Union troops through dense fog, neither side able to see more than a few dozen yards ahead, nor make any progress in either direction.
Screw that.
Well, by midnight, Lookout Mountain was quiet. Pettus and Holtzclaw received orders at 2 a.m. to march off the mountain. Post-war write-ins of both Union and Confederate veterans refer to a brilliant moon which slipped into the blackness of a total lunar eclipse. Oh, nice. Shit. Screening the Confederate withdrawal.
Oh.
That night, Bragg, stunned by the defeat on Lookout Mountain, asked his 2 corps commanders whether to retreat from Chattanooga or to stand and fight.
When you guys are in a terrible spot.
Yeah.
Hardy counseled retreat, but Breckinridge convinced Bragg to fight it out on the strong position of Missionary Ridge. Accordingly, the troops withdrawn from Lookout Mountain were ordered to the left flank of Bragg's army. November 25th, 1863.
Hardy's like, why'd you ask me then?
Right. He's like, November 25th, 1863. Hooker's men encountered difficulty rebuilding the burned bridges over Chattanooga Creek. They were delayed in their movement toward the left flank of Bragg's remaining forces on Old Missionary Ridge. They reached the Rossville Gap as Thomas's men were sweeping over Missionary Ridge. Hooker faced his 3 divisions to the north and drove into Bragg's flank, furthering the disruption of the Confederate line, sending the Army of Tennessee into full retreat.
Yeah. Hooker continued his role in the campaign with his unsuccessful pursuit of the Confederates that was beaten back at the Battle of Ringgold Gap, which was high up. Casualties for the Battle of Lookout Mountain were relatively light by the standards of Civil War, 671 for the Union and 1251 for the Confederates, including 1,064 captured or missing for them.
No.
So, not really much at all, huh?
No.
Sylvanus Cadwallader, a war reporter accompanying Grant's army, wrote that it was more like a magnificent skirmish than a major battle.
Oh, okay.
General Grant, whose focus was on the northern end of Missionary Ridge, and who was usually partial to the achievements of his key subordinates in the Western Army, later denigrated Hooker's achievement right in his memoirs. The Battle of Lookout Mountain is one of the romances of the war. There was no such battle and no action even worthy to be called the battle on Lookout Mountain. It is all poetry.
Oh.
So saying not as big as what it seems.
Right. Nevertheless, though, the action was important in ensuring control of the Tennessee River and the railroad in Chattanooga and endangering the entire Confederate line on the Missionary Ridge. Brigadier General Montgomery C. Meigs, Quartermaster General of the Union Army, observing the fog-shrouded action from Orchard Knob, was the first writer to name it the Battle Above the Clouds. Portions of Lookout Mountain Battlefield are preserved today by the National Park Service as part of the Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park.
Right.
You guys go check that shit out and walk trails and all that good shit.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of that Battle of Missionary Ridge, because we got it the very next day on November 25th. On that very day, Grant's plan concentrated on the attack by Sherman against Bragg's right flank at Tunnel Hill. He gave his support and role to Thomas. He wrote him as follows. I have instructed Sherman to advance as soon as it is light in the morning, and your attack, which will be simultaneous, will be in cooperation. Your command will either carry the rifle pits and ridge directly in front of them or move to the left, as the presence of the enemy may require.
Oh.
Go.
You ain't kidding. Grant had no particular expectation for Hooker other than to...
I don't think these guys like each other, to be honest.
Right. Other than Grant had no particular expectation for Hooker other than to divert Bragg's attention by continued demonstrations on Lookout Mountain, which had been evacuated by the old Ribs. However, Thomas wanted support on his flank and called Hooker to cross the valley and demonstrate against Bragg's left flank directly at the Rossville Gap.
They're like, Hooker, we don't want you to actually do anything. We just want you to demonstrate stuff.
Right. Can you do that stuff, bud?
Well, in a letter to his brother, Sherman wrote, the whole philosophy of the battle was that I should get by a dash a position on the extremity of the Missionary Ridge from which the enemy should be forced to drive me or allow his depot at Chickamauga Station to be in danger. I expected Bragg to attack me at daylight, but he did not. And to bring matters to a crisis quickly, for the sake of Burnside and East Tennessee, Grant ordered me to assume the offensive.
Got to, right?
Well, Sherman had about 16,600 men in the three divisions of Brigadier Generals Morgan Lewis Smith, John E. Smith, and his foster brother and brother-in-law at the same time, Hugh Boyle Ewing.
Oh.
Damn, so married his sister and was his foster brother. Okay.
Oh, shit.
And three regiments of Colonel Adolphus Bushbeck's brigade from the 11th Corps. Sherman also had Jefferson C. Davis's division guarding his rear.
Fantastic. Around 10 o'clock in that morning, Grant dispatched the rest of Howard's 11th Corps from Thomas to Scheumann. Hardee, from the Oreb side, had about 9,000 Confederates in the divisions of Claiborne and Walker, with another 4,000 soon to arrive in Stevenson's division. Hardee's left, Benjamin F. Chetham's decimated division, occupied the ridge between Thomas and Sherman's front. I don't know if you want that there.
No.
However, at dawn, when Sherman was supposed to attack, he was opposed by just 3 small brigades under Claiborne, about 4,000 men, and only the Texas Brigade of Brigadier General James A. Smith was actually positioned on Tunnel Hill. But, seemingly unnerved by his incoherent positioning, Sherman delayed. Incoherent. But seemingly unnerved by his incorrect position, Sherman delayed until about 9 o'clock a.m.
These guys are not big enough for me to be fighting right now.
But they are Texans, so everything's bigger in Texas.
He selected just 2 brigades from Ewing's division to attack. Brigadier General John Corse would approach from the north, Colonel John M. Loomis from the northwest, across the open fields between the railroads. Sherman ordered Corse's brigade with a detachment from Joseph A.J. Lightburn's brigade to attack along the narrow length of Tunnel Hill. Colonel John M. Loomis's brigade...
Is that Billy's great uncle?
Could be. Isn't the doctor named Loomis in Halloween?
Shit.
All right. He was supported by Bushbeck, and he would move across the open fields on the west of the ridge, while Brigadier General Giles Alexander Smith's brigade would move through the valley on the east side of the ridge. The brigades of Brigadier General Charles L. Matthews and Colonel Greenberry Rom were held in reserve to follow up any successful attack.
Okay.
The brigades of Colonels Joseph Cockrell and Jesse I. Alexander would hold the heights seized the day before.
Fantastic. Corse drove off the Oreb skirmish line and seized some half-built defensive works at the north end of the Tunnel Hill. Continuing over the crest of the hill, Corse charged Claiborne's main position, but was repulsed. After several attempts, Scheumann, he gave up on attacking from Corse's position, and the fighting shifted to the west side of the ridge. Old Loomis from the old Union side had advanced to the railroad in front of the ridge, where he skirmished with Walker's division. Bushbeck, followed by Matthews and then Rom, were sent up to the west slope of Tunnel Hill between Loomis and Corse. Claiborne's salient began to feel the pressure, and it came close to breaking. Close, but did it.
Hardee fed in reinforcements from Stevenson's division, and Claiborne ordered a general counterattack. Charging down the hill at 4 p.m., the Confederates routed Sherman's men, who were too tired and low on ammunition to resist, and captured numerous Federal prisoners.
Oh, shit, dude. That could have been avoided.
Sherman's attack came to a halt, as you would think. A tactical failure in which he lost almost 2,000 casualties.
Damn.
But committed only a fraction of his available force in a direct assault on a strong position.
Right.
So he's like, those guys, well, they're expendable. He did that rather than attempting to outflank Bragg. Military historian David Eicher called this Sherman's worst experience as a commander, first miscalculating the terrain and then stumbling through a prolonged, unsuccessful, and needless attack.
Yeah, that was kind of funky, but he had a plan there, I believe, right? You would think there had to be something.
Oh, he'll redeem himself, don't worry. I think.
Sherman? I think he does good.
Well, Sherman does the march to the Atlantic later on in 1864 or something like that, but here he does, though, I think. On the other hand, Stephen E. Woodworth judged that Claiborne was in his fine form today, deftly shifting troops around his hilltop position and skillfully judging when and where to launch limited counterattacks, often leading them himself.
Oh, fantastic.
For him.
Right. An alternative view has been expressed by B.H. Liddell Hart, who contends that Sherman did not commit his entire force because he was expecting Bragg to attack him to dislodge the Union force from threatening position. He gave the Confederates several hours in which to attack them, and when he saw that they showed no signs of accepting the invitation, he made it more pressed by launching 3 brigades against their position. But his real desire is unmistakably established by the fact that he kept 3 brigades to hold his own ridge, with 5 more in reserve behind him.
He was trying to goad him out to come out and attack him.
Right.
Around 2:30 p.m., Grant spoke with Brigadier General Thomas J. Wood, his classmate from West Point. He said, General Sherman seems to be having a hard time. It seems as if we ought to go help him. He decided to send Woods's and Major General Philip Sheridan's divisions against the Confederate rifle pits at the base of the ridge, hoping to concern Bragg and relieve the pressure on the other Sherman. Grant suggested this idea to Thomas, but personal relations between the two generals were chilly during the campaign. And Thomas rebuffed Grant's idea. He had no intention of attacking until he was assured that Hooker was successfully attacking the enemy's flank.
Really?
Meanwhile, 4th Corps Commander Major General Gordon Granger was nearby, completely absorbed in the activities of a battery of artillery.
Irritated, old Grant asked Thomas to order Granger to take command of his own corps, and now order your troops to advance and take the enemy's first line of rifle pits. He's getting pissed.
All right.
About 3 p.m., Thomas passed the order to Granger, but incredibly, Granger ignored the order and resumed commanding the battery of artillery. He's like, "What'd you say?" "Oh, all right." After a further scolding from Grant, Granger finally issued orders to Wood and Sheridan. Messengers also went to Brigadier Generals Absalom Baird and Richard W. Johnson of Major General John Palmer's 14th Corps, ordering them to move upon hearing the rapid, successive discharge of 6 artillery pieces. When you hear that shit, roll it.
Get over here. Thomas deployed 23,000 men in 4 divisions with brigades in line. From left to right, which was north to south. The divisions of Baird, brigades of Colonel Edward H. Phelps, Colonel Ferdinand Vandiver, and Brigadier General John B. Turchin. Wood had brigades of Brigadier General Samuel Betty, August Willich, and William Babcock Hazen. Sheridan had his brigades of Brigadier General George Wagner, Colonel Charles Garrison Harker, and Colonel Francis Trowbridge Sherman. And Johnson had the brigades of Colonel William L. Stoughton and Brigadier General William Carlin.
Really?
Each brigade consisted of 2 lines, one behind the other, with skirmishers leading the way.
About 20,000 old Rebs were defending the center of the ridge, against which Thomas's men marched, overlapping the Union approach on both ends. From right to left, north to south, were Chetham's division, brigades of Brigadier Generals Edward Walthill, John Moore, and John Jackson. Hinman's division, commanded by Brigadier General Patton Anderson, J. Patton Anderson, that is. Brigades of Brigadier Generals Alfred Vaughn, Zachariah Diaz, and Arthur Manigault. You got Breckinridge division, commanded by Brigadier General William Bate. Brigades of Brigadier General Joseph Lewis, Colonel R.C. Taylor, and Brigadier General Jesse Finley. Tyler. And Stewart's division, which brigades of Colonel Randy L. Gibson, Brigadier General Otho Strahl, Brigadier General Marcellus Augustus Stovall, and Colonel James T. Holtzcall.
All right, around 3:40 p.m., the signal guns fired before Baird could brief Turchin. Some regimental officers claimed to get conflicting orders from the same brigadier.
Right.
When asked where he was to stop, Willich told one officer, "I don't know. At hell, I expect." Sheridan sent an orderly back to Granger, inquiring whether the objective was the base or the top of the ridge, but the signal guns fired before he got an answer.
Oh, man.
Wagner, Turchin, and Carlin thought they were supposed to carry the ridge top. Most officers were guided only by what the units on either side of them did. Jeez. How could you be so unprepared? Just
dumb. 9,000 Confederates holding the rifle pits at the base of the ridge were also plagued by conflicting orders.
I guess no upper hand here because they're both stupid.
Some were ordered to fire a volley and then retreat. Others were told to hold their ground. Those who stayed to fight were swamped by superior Union numbers. The Union tide was irresistible, with charging men shouting, "Chickamauga! Chickamauga!" Many of the Confederates were captured, while the rest started the 300 to 400 climb to the ridge top in fear of being shot in the back. Jeez. Those who escaped were completely winded by the effort and in no shape to defend themselves for several minutes.
Well, they had to catch your breath.
Right.
100 Confederate cannons lying at the top of the ridge initially hit a few of their enemies during the Union rush.
So stupid.
But once the Union soldiers stopped at the rifle pits, they began to zero in on them, though.
Oh.
The Confederate riflemen also poured in their fire, causing several Union casualties.
Oh, wow.
After several minutes, some Union unit commanders moved their men forward to get out of the worst fire. I would assume that's what you would do.
Right.
Willich's skirmishers started advancing up the ridge without orders. Deciding that following them was preferable to being massacred in the rifle pits.
You ain't kidding.
Willich gave orders to advance.
You ain't kidding.
Although several of his units were already doing so. They said, well, I don't care what you say. I'm getting the hell out of here.
Right.
Well, seeing this, Hazen and Beatty also ordered their first lines up. When Wood reached the rifle pits, the men in the second line begged him to order them up as well. Right. And Wood sent them forward. He said, "Get the hell out of here, boys."
Can we go? You can go.
Get out of here.
You may go. Grant's order to halt at the rifle pits at the base of the bridge was misunderstood by far too many of the generals charged with executing it. Some doubted the order because they thought it was absurd to stop an attack at the instant when the attackers would be most vulnerable to fire from the crest and to a counterattack. Others apparently received garbled versions of the order.
So why why did he instruct him to stop there in the first place? Or did they just think that's what he said? I don't know.
Wow. While Claiborne from the old Reb skillfully made the terrain work for him at Tunnel Hill, Confederate dispositions along central and southern portions of Missionary Ridge allowed the terrain to work for the attackers. In the final analysis, the strength of the seemingly impregnable Missionary Ridge position turned out to be mostly a bluff.
Of course. Grant was shocked when he saw the Union troops climbing the ridge. He asked first Thomas, then Granger, who had given the orders. Neither general claimed responsibility, but Granger replied, "When those fellows get started, all hell can't stop them."
You ain't kidding.
Granger then sent a courier to Wood, allowing him permission to take the ridge top if he thought it was possible. Several messengers went about at this time with differing orders, leading to more confusion.
So dumb. On the far left, Phelps and Van Devere captured the rifle pits and held their position. Having negotiated some rough ground, Turchin's brigade lagged behind. But as soon as his men overran the rifle pits, the mad Russian immediately urged his men up the ridge. Before Baird could send his other two brigades, he received an order to halt. Wagner and Harker's men, they started climbing soon after Woods' brigade. Wagner got halfway up before he received an order that he was to stop at the base of the ridge. He ordered his men to pull back. As they did, they suffered heavy losses from elated Confederate defenders. You dumbasses.
Wagner's brigade suffered more casualties, around 22% than any other brigade in the assault.
Should have just kept on going.
Right. When Wagner and some of Harker's men returned to the rifle pits, they saw that Woods' division on their left and units of their own division on the right were still moving uphill.
Oh, wow.
Disgusted that a rival division was getting ahead, Wagner sent his second line up the ridge. Sheridan soon ordered Harker back up also. To their right, Francis Sherman's brigade faced an entrenched line about half of the way up the ridge and had hard going.
Uh-oh.
On the far right, Johnson's two brigades faced determined resistance at the rifle pits and were slow in starting up the ridge.
Oh, jeez. Strange things are happening. The Confederate line first cracked at Bird's Mill Road at about 5 p.m. One of Willich's regiment, joined by two of Hazen's, it worked its way within 50 yards of Confederate breastworks. Protected by a roll of ground, they crept closer. Then with a rush, they leapt over the works belonging to Colonel William Tucker's brigade. Surprised, the nearest defenders surrendered or fled for their lives. Alertly, the Union field officers swung their regiments to the right and left and began rolling up the Confederate line. Tucker bravely rallied his men, but this time, Willich and Hazen's men were flooding over the breastworks. He's like, damn, this is it.
Now, since Bragg had not provided for a tactical reserve and the narrow ridgetop left no place for one, his defenses were only a thin crust. And nobody likes thin crusts.
Right.
To seal off the breach, the Southern generals were placed on the horns of a dilemma. When they found Union troops on their flank, they had to pull regiments out of their defense line for a counterattack. This weakened the main line of resistance, just as the Union brigades to their front were swarming up to the crest.
Oh, wow.
Damn, yeah, that's quite the dilemma.
You ain't kidding. Once at the top of the ridge, Hazen swung his brigade south. Confederate lines in this direction were held by Brigadier General Alexander Reynolds' brigade, whose men had to endure a hard climb from the base of the ridge. Hit in front and flank, most of Reynolds' tired men melted away. Continuing south, Hazen flanked Colonel R.C. Tyler's brigade of Bates' division out of position, allowing Wagner's brigade to reach the crest. Bates' Florida brigade was soon driven away, allowing Harker's men to reach the top. Damn, it's just falling apart for the old Rebs. According to the diary from a man in the 7th Florida Infantry Regiment, Company K, the Union troops were able to move artillery pieces into place by disguising the guns as ambulances.
Okay. How that would work out, but
Do they have
on
people
carriages, I'm sure.
Pew, pew.
They would swing like a fireball around. The rebels held their fire, though, falling for the ruse until the guns were uncovered and opened fire. Yeah, so they probably had like wagons that had the medical mark on it or something. Colonel Randall L. Gibson's brigade was defeated by Francis Sherman's men.
Ooh.
Dogged by tough resistance and very steep slopes, Johnson's two brigades took the longest climb to the ridge, and Carlin's men finally reached the top around 5:30 p.m.
Damn, dude. Imagine how tired your legs are,
It's
like
just stupid.
noodles.
They're like, all right, guys, let's fight tomorrow.
Right.
Seeing that his position was hopeless, Stuart pulled the brigades of Brigadier Generals Otho Strahl and Marcellus Stovall off the ridge.
Oh.
Meanwhile, Willich wheeled to the north and began crushing the flank of Anderson's division. Willich's success assisted Beatty's brigade to get to the top.
Oh, I bet they did. Fantastic. The two brigades first drove off Brigadier General Arthur Mangalt's men and continued rolling north. As they came up the ridge, the Union brigades of Turchin, Van Devere, and Phelps, who was killed near the crest.
Poor guy.
They added their weight to the assault against the Confederate brigades of Brigadier General Zachariah Diaz, Alfred Vaughn, and John Jackson. Some rebel soldiers resisted stubbornly, but many panicked and ran when they realized that the old bluecoats were coming, and they were bearing down on them from the flank. Often the Southern infantry fled. Before the supporting artillerists could escape with their cannons. Oh, come on, guys.
In this manner, Anderson's entire division and Cheatham's left flank brigades of Brigadier Generals Jackson and Moore were routed. The northward Federal advance was only stopped by the stout fighting of Walthall's brigade, and nightfall came. So, more nightfall. Cheatham, Gist, Stevenson, and Claiborne were able to get their divisions away more or less intact.
Okay.
Although the Confederate soldiers were demoralized and chagrined by their defeat.
Oh, geez. Of course they were. That was just terrible. You guys thought you had the upper ground there.
Yeah.
You didn't have shit. The Army of the Cumberland's ascent of the Missionary Ridge was one of the war's most dramatic events. I can imagine.
There's a movie about that.
It has to be, you would think, right? Military historians Herman Hathaway and Archer Jones, they contend that the Battle of Missionary Ridge was the war's most notable example of a frontal assault succeeding against entrenched defenders holding high ground. Yeah, that never works.
Well, it did here.
Wow. A Union officer remembered that little regard to formation was observed. Each battalion assumed a triangular shape. The colors at the apex was as a color bearer dashes ahead of the line and falls. A comrade grasps the flag. He too falls. Then another picks it up, waves it defiantly, and as if it bearing a charmed life, he advances steadily towards the top.
Yep, you colors fall, next one right to it, you pick it up, run with it. By 6 p.m., the center of Bragg's line had broken completely and fled in panic, requiring the abandonment of Missionary Ridge and a headlong retreat eastward to the South Chickamauga Creek. The sole exception to the panic flight was Claiborne's command, his division augmented by 2 brigades from another division.
Uh-oh.
As the only command not in complete disarray, it was the last unit to withdraw and form the rear guard of Bragg's army as it retreated east.
Jeez.
Only Sheridan tried to pursue beyond Missionary Ridge, but he finally gave up late that night when he clearly was being supported by neither Granger nor Thomas.
Right.
So he said, I'm not going out here by
He's
myself.
like, wait, they ain't coming.
They're all resting. Screw this.
Yeah. After Major General Joseph Hooker's command left Lookout Mountain around 10 a.m. and moved east, they encountered a significant obstacle. The bridges across Chattanooga Creek, about a mile from Rossville Gap, had been burned by the old Rebs as they withdrew the night before, and the creek was running high. Brigadier General Peter Joseph Osterhaus, he assigned a 70-man pioneer unit to start rebuilding that very bridge, while men of the 27th Missouri created a rickety footbridge and began crossing one by one. Hooker decided to leave his guns and wagons behind so that all of his infantry could cross. But his advance was delayed about 3 hours, and the bulk of his force did not reach Rossville Gap until 3:30 p.m.
Well, meanwhile, Breckinridge was absent while the Union attack wrecked his corps. Worried about his left flank, he rode to the end of his line in the early afternoon. 3:30 p.m., about the time Thomas launched his 4-division attack on Missionary Ridge, Breckinridge visited Stewart's left flank brigade of Colonel James Holtzclaw, whose commander pointed to the southwest where Hooker's men were busily bridging Chattanooga Creek. Concerned about Rossville Gap, which lay undefended beyond his left flank, Breckinridge ordered Holtzclaw to send a couple of regiments to hold that position.
Damn right you better. You got a couple hours to do it.
Well,
no, that's too late. By the time Southerners reached the Gap, Osterhaus's division had already marched through. Lieutenant J. Campbell Breckinridge, the general's son, and aide-de-camp, he rode into a group from the 9th Iowa and was captured. Hooker quickly faced his troops to the north, organized a 3-pronged attack. He sent Osterhaus along a trail east of the Missionary Ridge. Cruft he sent onto the ridge itself, and Geary along the western face of the ridge. Holtzclaw from the old Reb side faced his men south and put up a fight. But Cruft and Osterhaus began herding the outnumbered Confederates north along Missionary Ridge.
Get along now, little sheep. Hearing a tremendous racket to the north, Breckinridge finally rode off to find out what was wrong. As Holtzclaw retreated before Hooker's command, he eventually bumped into Colonel Anson G. McCook's 2nd Ohio of Carlin's brigade, now astride the ridge. Surrounded by superior forces on 4 sides, about 700 of Holtzclaw men surrendered, along with soldiers from the other brigades of Stewart's division.
Right.
Dude, just give up. Get all you guys out of there. What are you doing?
Jeez. During that, right.
This ridge is nothing no more.
Right. It's got to go. During that very night, Bragg ordered his army to withdraw toward Chickamauga Station on the Western Atlantic Railroad, which is the current site of the Lavelle Airfield.
Good with him.
And following the day, began retreating from there toward Dalton, Georgia, in 2 columns over 2 routes. The pursuit by Grant was effectively thwarted by Claiborne's rearguard defense at the Battle of Ringgold Gap. Well, look at Claiborne holding back a pursuit by Grant.
Right. Casualties for the Union Army during the battles for Chattanooga, which was Orchard Knob, Lookout Mountain, and Missionary Ridge, amounted at 5,824, which was 753 killed, 4722 wounded, and 349 missing. And that was for the Union of about 56,000 engaged. It's 10%.
Damn.
Confederate casualties were 6,667, 361 killed, 2,160 wounded, and 46 missing, mostly prisoners.
Oh.
Missing or taken prisoner, of about 44,000 for them. It's more than 10%.
Damn, 4,000 missing. Shit.
Well, they were.
Yeah.
It says mostly prisoners, so
Right.
they were all prisoners, taken prisoners. Southern losses may have been higher. Grant claimed 6,142 prisoners. In addition, the Union Army seized 40 cannons, 69 limbers and caissons, and when a chaplain asked General Thomas whether the dead should be sorted and buried by state in the new military cemetery, Thomas replied, "Mix them up. I'm tired of states' rights."
Oh, damn. He did that. He went there. He went there. Dude,
like,
that was a...
He was like, it's a myth.
Right. This is a significant loss from the old Confederates right here.
Yep, not good for them.
Oh my.
That's one of their main armies.
The Confederate enthusiasm that had risen so high after Chickamauga had been dashed at Chattanooga.
Sure had.
One of the Confederacy's two major armies was routed.
Yep.
The Union now held the undisputed control of the state of Tennessee, including Chattanooga, which was the gateway to the lower South. The city became the supply and logistics base for Sherman's 1864 Atlanta campaign, as well as for the Army of Cumberland, and Grant had won his final battle in the West prior to receiving command of all of Union armies in March of 1864. Damn.
That's some bad stuff by the old Confeds, man. They're on the ropes.
Vicksburg,
All they got to their name right now is Virginia.
Gettysburg, and this battle here. Boom. Done. Wow. Took him out. Snout.
Speaking of that Battle of Ringgold Gap, that old Grant was thwarted. We'll have that coming up probably next episode, as well as the Battle of Mine Run in Virginia. Going back to Virginia, ain't been there in a while since the one little battle at Rappahannock Station, but before that, it's been a few episodes. Then we go ahead to Tennessee again for the final out to round out the year of 1863 at Fort Sanders, Bean Station, and Mossy Creek.
Oh.
Yep, and those might all be in one episode. We don't know.
We don't know.
So, yeah, we're working our way into 1864 here on the old battles of the American
And the
Civil
old
War.
Rebs thought they were about to have a good year, that first battle of 1864. Like, yeah, here we go, boys. And
Ran up a couple.
a couple months there. Yeah, actually.
And they got some times. They tried to, but then it's just like, boom, nothing.
And then it's, yeah.
Done. Yeah, there's actually a lot of red.
It is.
But we'll go over that next episode.
Hey.
I mean, they did pretty good. Only 20 less battles lost in 1864.
Huh?
They won 52 in 1864 and only 32 in 63.
Got their asses handed to them.
Yeah. That's going to do it for us. We'll be back next week for some more battles. Reminder, YouTube at Bang Dang Network. Give us a subscription. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, give us a review. And we'll see you next Friday here on the Bang Dang Network. We are the Mouth of Michiganders with
Bang Dang.